Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is moving from competition to cooperation. But before we get started, let's just settle in. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose. Hold it and feel that energy just coursing through your body. Just imagine these sparkles of energy lighting up your cells, and exhale any tension and relax your neck and your jaw and your shoulders. And let's take another deep breath in through your nose. Hold it and just feel that life energy coursing throughout your body and radiating beyond. And to exhale any remaining tension. And then let's just press our palms gently together and softly rub your fingers against your palms. Feel the tingling in your fingers, feel the tingling in your palms, and the deliciousness of that sensation, and how fortunate we are to be able to presence ourselves to being in these bodies right here, right now. So I'm a coach, and I have a process that I've developed called Core Connection, interestingly enough, which is a really remarkable process for assisting people to move through foundational ways of being into a deeper connection with their inner core. And so I was having a coaching session with one of my clients, and um, this person is a trained athlete. And we got to talking about competition and came to a revelation that our culture is based on competition, a paradigm of competition. And that, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, that is the very root of so many of our cultural ills right now. So, how is that so? We always, we're conditioned to think that competition is a good thing. And I think competition can be a good thing when we own it rather than when it owns us. And what I mean by it owning us is that it becomes one of these invisible things that runs everything on every level and dictates our interactions with one another in a very unconscious way. So let's just look at this notion of competition and how really truly pervasive it is. So we compete for resources. We have an underlying belief that if I have more, someone else has less. And I want to say good morning. I don't know if that's Sue or Dido, but whoever it is, I'm delighted to have you here with me this morning. Thank you so much. So we're talking about competition today, and we talk about resources. So one of the things that competition breeds actually is, or is bred from, maybe, is an idea of scarcity in certain respect, because I just started talking about we have this belief that if I have more resources, you have less. And if I have more happiness, you have less. And if I have more, um, even if I have more money, you have less, which is not necessarily the case, but we compete based on all of these in all of these arenas, not to mention we compete in, let's say, in job and career, and we assign value, like intrinsic value, to the winner of the competition. So, for instance, good morning, Jennifer. Welcome. So glad to have you here. We're talking about competition and moving from competition to collaboration and cooperation. So I was talking about resources and thinking that if I have more, it means you have less. Um, I lost my train of thought, but we're going to get back there in a minute. So as we look at this idea, here it is. We assign intrinsic value to people based on competition. So, for example, if I make more money, or if I have more money, or if I'm born into more money, somehow it means that I am better and that I am maybe smarter, or that I have more rights or should have more rights because I have more money, for example, which is really insane. It's insane to be judging a human being's value based on dollars. It's truly crazy, but we have all these preconceptions based on this competitive notion that that more money means that somehow I am intrinsically better as a human being. And I think that a lot of what we're observing right now in our culture and the division in race, I think at the core of it is very much a division in, I'm going to say class, but what I really mean is socioeconomic status. And it's really, really interesting the biases that we experience and that we engender and that is invisible in our culture. I don't hear too many people talking about class right now. We're talking about race, but the disparity in our racial opportunities is very largely tied to the disparity in economic opportunities. So, Dido, I'm glad to see that it is you. Thank you. And Dido says, as a Brit living in the US, I'm always struck by how many people talk about winners and losers in everyday parlance. It is or was not the way people talked about things in Britain, although everyone was very class conscious there. Right. So, like, even in, you brought up a good point, as always, Dido, thank you. And that is that even in our general language, we talk about somebody as a loser or we talk about somebody as a winner. And that means that the winners are better, the losers are worse. And it becomes an identity that people take on and expand into the world. And at the heart of this is judging people and their value by what they produce in the world or what they have in the world in terms of material possessions, most often, or lineage, or um, education, or any number of other factors. And what what this boils down to, why this is such a really, really, really important topic, is that the notion of competition focuses all of our attention on outward measures, and it also focuses all our attention on the outcomes that we achieve in the world. That's where we derive our metrics from which to be able to assign value to people, to other people's lives. I remember having a conversation with somebody years ago, and they were talking about another person, and they said that person's just a waste of life. And that is at the heart of this whole thing. Is like, how dare anyone determine that another human being is a waste of life? And what is it in our thinking that could even allow us to entertain such an idea. And I think what we're seeing in our culture right now with all this upheaval is a rebellion, a long overdue rebellion against this notion of better and worse, or really there's like this underlying metric that evolves out of the primary assumption of competition and consequently lack. And underneath that, fear. So we see this with the way that our country is, or our government is addressing the issues around immigration in this country, where if the immigrants come in, they are going to steal our jobs. It's insane. And so what we're called to do in moving into this new paradigm is, instead of operating out of this place of competition and lack, and this person that I was mentioning in the very beginning said, I just now realized how deeply entrenched competition is in me, like to every degree. Like, this person has different, better clothes than I do, or more furniture than I do, or more food in their fridge than I do, or any number of other things. And it was shocking to them to recognize how deeply this went. So to be able to move from a paradigm of scarcity into a paradigm of sufficiency, to be able to move from a paradigm of competition to a paradigm of cooperation and collaboration. Like, if you're in business in the same arena that I'm in business, then you're my competitor, and we have to compete for what little there is, the underlying assumptions. And this notion really perpetuates the division and the divisiveness that we see not only in our culture right now, but it's in our culture on all levels, and it's throughout all cultures, and it's across all countries. You look at, well, if uh, this country does well, it means that we do less well. It's a false a false equivalency, and we get to really look into our fundamental invisible assumptions much more deeply now. And this is what is pervasive on the planet right now. And it is this notion of competition and scarcity is also what has allowed us to be such a devastating influence on our environment. I'm going to take a pause here for a second, and Jennifer has a comment. I even teach my grandchildren that a moth is just as important as a butterfly, just as lives, anyone's lives are just as important as ours, no matter their beliefs, race, class, education, etc. We have no winners or losers in our home. We are all equal. And Jennifer, thank you for that. We are all equal, but we are not the same. And I don't mean necessarily separate but equal, but I'm saying that we do get to elevate our individual talents with each other in this beautiful collaboration that we have the opportunity to move into, so that we can complement one another. Complement meaning not speak compliments, but work in conjunction with one another, complement one another, to all rise together. And that's what we get to learn how to do. And Dido says the other thing that I've noticed is how people talk about being independent a lot, that notion of competition. Well, really, for us to thrive, it takes interdependence. Our families, friends, communities, colleagues aligned with cooperation. So I agree with you, Dido, and independence for me has always been a really, really huge and important thing. And what is important about independence is my freedom of thought and my ability to make my own um, evaluations that are driven by presence and awareness and discernment rather than collective being part of a sometimes mindless collective that's driven by somebody else's agenda. Jennifer says, "Oh yes, we celebrate our differences as well." Absolutely. So if we were all the same, it would be a problem. We're not looking for us all to be the same. We are looking for us to bring our gifts and work together from what would it be? What would it be if we could work and play and live from the assumption of sufficiency? And I've spoken about sufficiency previously, but it would be a very different place because we would not be killing other people because they infringed upon our territory. We would not be um, as oppositional as we have had centuries and centuries and eons of practice being. And I just invite you to look at how this notion of competition and judgment, how they go hand in hand, and how uh, the idea of labeling people winners and losers and all of this is actually disrupting the connection to living. So that's a big statement, right? What do I mean by that? Well, the way that so many of us operate in the world is by acquisition. So competition and acquisition go hand in hand. Obviously, if everything's a competition, if I have more than you, then I win. And sure, we've all heard, he who has the best toys wins. But the truth of the matter is that you don't get to take those toys with you. And what happens is that the focus on those toys, um, takes us away from actually the experience of life. And so, in this coaching environment that I have been blessed to create with amazing people that are my clients, we're exploring something that is really, really, in my opinion, radically revolutionary. And what that is living to live, not not doing stuff to get things done, not doing stuff so I can check off my accomplishments and then run to the next accomplishment, not doing stuff to impress somebody else or to maintain a notion of who we are, um, to preserve a certain identity, but but living life, prioritizing living, the experience of living itself, meaning the experience of taking a breath, the experience of smelling a flower, the experience of witnessing the beauty in the world, the experience, the experience. And as we connect more to the truth that the only thing, and this is the experiment, that the only thing that's important is actually the process of living, like being present to life in the moment, when that becomes the most important thing, then the things that we do emerge from that rather than we do at the expense of actually experiencing life. And I'm reminded of the Carlos Castaneda books that I've mentioned before that I read, I think when I was either in my late teens or early 20s, that I just consumed them. Uh, but Carlos Castaneda's shaman teacher told him to be guided by his death, to use his death as his advisor. And the beauty of that, the value of that, is to say, if I were to die right now, and hopefully, as we are more present to this this experience of COVID, we can really entertain this as something that is a possibility, like a reality. We get to go and look. What is the life that I'm living? Have I been a human doing, or have I been a human being? And what kind of life did I live? And that's what being guided by or counseled by the ultimate fact of your death is to be able to assess your life here now and look at the quality of that living. And Jennifer says, yes, I say this to my husband, I'm living to live, not just survive. Exactly. And so where this comes from for me is the awareness that even before COVID and even before the social transformation that is currently underway, we had and have a global challenge. And that global challenge is to transform the way that we be on the planet in order to preserve our survival on the planet. Because if we keep going the way that we were going, we have about 10 years before it's irreversible, the damage that we've done. And um, then life is going to be taking, and on the way there too. It's not like all of a sudden the 10-year mark expires and life changes, but we need to transform the way that we be on the planet, and it's an urgent cry, or we will end up in a place where we have made our planet uninhabitable for us. And so we get to look at living, and because we may not have an indefinite period of time here, we had been racing toward extinction, and we get to look at that now and going forward, and what are the underlying paradigms that are shaping the the behavior that we've given ourselves permission to exercise in the world. And one of those underlying beliefs is that it's a competition, and that some of us have more of a right to breathe than others, and that some of us are better as humans and have a right to be alive more than others. And so it circles back to the conversation about what's happening now in our culture with the growing awareness of social inequity. And maybe it's not even just a growing awareness, it's also a growing honesty about it. Then we get to look at what has made the injustices that we have lived with as an entrenched part of our civilization, what has made that okay? What has justified that? What has created it? And if we look at this notion of competition, and again, the underlying notion of um, opposition, like if I have more, you have less, if I win, you lose, et cetera, then we get to reshape this underlying foundation, and it's really, really socially revolutionary to be living to live. And I invite you to really engage in that consideration, living to live rather than living to do, and to start moving the focus from accomplishments and achievements to the actual experience of living. The fear is that people encounter is I won't do anything in the world. If I'm living just to live, which is an ironic turn of phrase there. If I'm living life and putting my attention on living, then I won't do anything. And that is actually, although it's counterintuitive, my experience with myself and with others that are engaging in this experiment with me is that the that we do things that are moved and generated from our hearts, and as a greater and more appropriate response to the moment, we have a greater ability to see something that is enlivening and engaging to us, and that inspires us. And so when we live to live, we have then the opportunity for inspiration to emerge from that. And we don't value ourselves based on whatever that inspiration produces. We value ourselves and each other based on the quality of life, meaning the experiential joy of life that we get to share. And just to put in another kind of revolutionary thought here, I kind of believe that it doesn't matter if you are someone living in the forest and foraging and talking to the animals, if you have a frequency of presence and connection, that is a greater contribution to the world than building a skyscraper, for example. We don't need more skyscrapers. We do need to elevate the frequency of of consciousness on the planet. And that's where really truly connecting to living is so important. And that's what it's going to feed, is the elevation of consciousness and awareness on the planet. And that is the essential thing that has to happen in order for us to save ourselves on this planet. So pretty amazing stuff, all from the notion of competition. And I invite you to dig deeply and look at where you in your life might be operating from a place of competition, where the language might come into play. Like, even, I'm going to take this on, I'm going to crush it, I'm going to kill it, I'm going to, just whatever. You get the idea. And I'd love to see comments about it at some point. Please, if this resonates for you, share it. And it's Friday, so I'm done here for the week, but I will be back on Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern. This is the Enlightened World Network, and I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. And I invite you to check out the really awesome programming here on Enlightened World Network. There are all kinds of wonderful things happening over the course of the weekend and every day. And with that, I wish you a wonderful weekend of living and really presencing yourself to life without having to do anything to uh, to reinforce your intrinsic value. Just you being here is life expressing itself.